Blood is thicker than water, or so they say. But in my family, a luxury clothing boutique in Manhattan was apparently worth completely destroying my life. My mother illegally sold the vineyard I inherited behind my back, so I destroyed her perfect reality with a single piece of paper. If you've ever stood in the middle of a vineyard in Sonoma Valley just before dawn, you know the smell. It's a rich, heavy blend of damp earth, crushed leaves, and the sweet, sharp promise of fermenting grapes. For as long as I can remember, that smell was my home. While other little girls were playing dress-up or dreaming of big cities, I was trailing behind my grandfather, Ariston Pendleton, my boots caked in California mud, learning the difference between a Cabernet Sauvignon grape and a Merlot before I could even multiply fractions. Grandpa Ariston was a titan of a man, with hands like cracked leather and a heart completely devoted to the 50 acres of rolling hills he called the Pendleton Estate. He raised me after my parents divorced when I was 7. Well, he raised me. My mother, Brenda, took one look at the dirt and the isolation of the estate and bolted for a high-rise condo in San Francisco, taking my younger sister, Chloe, with her. Brenda was a woman who practically sweated image and status. To her, the vineyard wasn't a legacy, it was a muddy ATM. She and Chloe only ever visited when they needed a check. Chloe was the undeniable golden child, a pageant queen turned, aspiring socialite who never heard the word no in her entire life. Whenever they drove up in Brenda's pristine white Mercedes, I knew exactly what was coming. A sigh of disgust at my dusty jeans, a lecture about my lack of ambition, and a closed-door meeting with Grandpa that usually ended with him writing a substantial check to fund Chloe's latest whim. But Grandpa always protected the land. The soil remembers, Clara, he'd tell me, squeezing my shoulder. People will lie to you, they will use you, and they will leave you. But the land? You put your sweat into the land, and it will always feed you. When I turned 22, I officially became the estate manager. By 28, I was the head winemaker, and we were producing award-winning vintages that were finally putting Pendleton on the map. I poured my youth, my relationships, and every ounce of my energy into that soil. Then last year, Grandpa Ariston got sick. Pancreatic cancer. It was fast, brutal, and ugly. I was the one who changed his bedpans, administered his morphine, and held his hand while he hallucinated. Brenda came twice, once to complain about the smell of the hospice nurses, and a second time to aggressively ask the doctor how much longer it would take. Chloe didn't come at all. She was too busy attending Fashion Week in Milan, posting filtered selfies with captions about how she was praying for her family. When Grandpa passed, a massive piece of my soul died with him. But the reading of his will brought a temporary, bittersweet vindication. We sat in the polished, mahogany office of his longtime attorney, Daviel Harrison. Brenda sat with her legs crossed, wearing a black designer suit that looked more suited for a gala than a mourning period. Chloe was beside her, tapping her acrylic nails on her phone screen. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and read the document. Grandpa had left Brenda a lump sum of $150,000. He left Chloe the exact same amount, and he left the Pendleton estate, the house, the land, the business, and the brand, valued at nearly $8 million entirely to me. Excuse me? Brenda's voice sliced through the quiet room like a razor. She dropped her designer sunglasses on the table. There has to be a mistake. That land is family property. I am his daughter. Clara is just a granddaughter. Ariston was very clear. Brenda, Mr. Harrison said gently but firmly. Clara has run the business for a decade. The estate is not to be liquidated. It is left to her, in its entirety. Chloe looked up from her phone, her lips pouting in a furious scowl. But Mom, what about my boutique? You promised we were going to use the estate money to secure the lease in Soho. I already told the designers I had the capital. Brenda's face turned an ugly shade of mottled red. She looked at me, her eyes narrowing into slits of pure venom. You manipulated him, you little snake. You kept us away from him at the end so you could poison his mind and steal our inheritance. I kept you away? I laughed, though my chest ached with grief. You were in Milan, Chloe. And Mom, you literally asked the doctor if you could expedite the process so you wouldn't miss your country club tennis tournament. The estate is mine. It's what Grandpa wanted. I'm not selling it, and I'm not funding a vanity project in New York. They stormed out, threatening lawsuits and promising I would regret it. I didn't care. I had the land. I had my grandfather's legacy, or so I thought. 3 months later, I had to travel to Bordeaux, France, for a crucial 3-week viticulture symposium and to secure a new distribution deal for our upcoming reserve vintage. It was the first time I had stepped away from the vineyard since Grandpa died. I left my trusted foreman Hector in charge, locked up the main house, and boarded my flight. The trip was a success. I felt alive, inspired, and ready to take Pendleton Estate to the next level. I landed back at San Francisco International Airport, exhausted but happy, dragging my suitcase to my truck. I drove the hour and a half back to Sonoma. The familiar winding roads felt like a warm embrace, but when I turned onto the private dirt road leading to the estate, I slammed on my brakes. The grand wrought iron gates, which were always left open, were chained shut with a heavy padlock. Confused, I stepped out of the truck. Nailed to the beautiful stone pillar that Grandpa and I had built together was a massive, garish sign. Sold. Future home of the Vista Luxury Housing Development. My stomach plummeted into my shoes. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I shook the gates, screaming for Hector, but the property was dead silent. I peered through the iron bars. The vines, the beautiful, decades-old Cabernet vines that I had pruned with my own hands, were being ripped out of the ground by 2 massive yellow bulldozers parked near the tasting room. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and dialed Hector. "Clara?" he answered, his voice thick with guilt and sorrow. "I'm so sorry, Clara. I tried to call you. But your mother. She came with the sheriff. She had papers. She told me you authorized the sale while you were in Europe. They gave me an hour to clear out." "What papers?" I screamed, the world spinning around me. "I own the estate, Hector. I didn't authorize anything." "She said she had the power of attorney," Hector whispered. "She sold it to a developer, Clara. The land is gone." I don't remember the drive to San Francisco. I only remember the blinding, white-hot rage that propelled my foot onto the gas pedal. I pulled up to Brenda's luxury high-rise, threw my keys at the bewildered valet, and marched past the doorman, who was too intimidated by the look of absolute murder on my face to stop me. I took the elevator to the penthouse and pounded on her double doors until my knuckles bled. The door swung open. Brenda stood there, holding a crystal glass of white wine, wearing a silk robe. She looked perfectly relaxed. Behind her, in the sprawling living room, Chloe was sitting on a plush white sofa, surrounded by fabric swatches and architectural blueprints. "What did you do?" I hissed, my voice trembling so violently I could barely form the words. "What the hell did you do to my vineyard?" Brenda took a slow, deliberate sip of her wine. "Keep your voice down, Clara. You're acting like a lunatic. Come in before the neighbors hear you." I shoved past her into the apartment, snatching a blueprint off the coffee table. It was titled Chloe's Closet, Soho Flagship. "You sold my home," I gasped, the reality finally suffocating me. "You sold Grandpa's estate. It wasn't yours to sell. I am going to have you arrested for fraud. I will put you in a federal prison, Mom, I swear to God." Chloe rolled her eyes and went back to typing on her phone. "Oh, stop being so dramatic, Clara. It was just a bunch of dirt and rotten grapes. Now I have my store. Mom did what she had to do." "How?" I demanded, turning on Brenda. "Mr. Harrison read the will. The deed was in my name. How did you legally sell my property?" Brenda smiled, a cold, shark-like smile that didn't reach her eyes. She walked over to her pristine glass desk and pulled out a manila folder, tossing it onto the table in front of me. "You always were a little too focused on your dirt to pay attention to the real world," Brenda said smoothly. 10 years ago, when you got into that horrible car crash and spent 3 weeks in a medically induced coma, Grandpa Ariston made me your medical and financial proxy. I was granted a durable power of attorney to handle your affairs. My blood ran cold. I remembered the crash. I was 19, but that was over a decade ago. "I recovered," I said, my voice shaking. "That power of attorney was dissolved." "Was it?" Brenda arched a perfectly plucked eyebrow. "You never went to the courthouse to formally revoke it, Clara. You just assumed it expired. But a durable POA remains in effect until the principal you legally revokes it in writing. While you were frolicking in France, I simply acted on your behalf. I deemed the vineyard a failing financial asset and sold it to Vista developers for $6 million. A bargain for them, but they paid in all cash, and it closed in 10 days. "You forged my consent," I whispered, horrified. You stole $6 million from me. I took my rightful inheritance, Brenda corrected sharply, her mask slipping for a second to reveal the bitter resentment beneath. My father was a foolish old man who was blinded by a manipulative little girl. He owed me that money. He owed Chloe a future. All I did was correct a terrible mistake. I took the $6 million, paid the capital gains tax out of your accounts, and transferred the rest to a corporate trust for Chloe's boutique. Legally, I acted in my capacity to manage your assets. I will sue you into oblivion, I cried, tears of pure fury finally spilling over my cheeks. Try, Brenda challenged, stepping close to me. Vista Developers has a team of corporate lawyers who will tie you up in court for the next 20 years. The bulldozers have already leveled the tasting room. The vines are gone, Clara. By the time you even get a hearing, it will be a subdivision of cookie-cutter mansions. You have no money left to fight me. You have nothing. She was right. I ran out of that apartment, threw up in the gutter outside her building, and spent the night sleeping in the cab of my truck in a Walmart parking lot. I checked my bank accounts the next morning. They were drained. She had used her power of attorney to access my personal accounts to pay the massive tax penalties of the rushed, undervalue sale. I had exactly $412 to my name. For a week, I was a ghost. I met with Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's lawyer. Davia looked older, exhausted, and deeply apologetic. She found a massive loophole, Clara, Daviel explained, rubbing his temples as we sat in his office. Because the POA was technically never revoked, she had the legal authority to sign the deed over to the developer on your behalf. Is it a breach of fiduciary duty? Absolutely. It's highly illegal to use a POA to enrich oneself. But to prove it, we have to sue her in civil court. We have to subpoena the trust, freeze the assets, and fight Vista Developers to reverse the sale. That will cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Money you don't have. So she just gets away with it? I asked, my voice hollow. She destroys 70 years of my grandfather's life, ruins my life, and buys Chloe a dress shop in New York? Davia looked down at his desk. I'm so sorry, Clara. Unless we find a smoking gun, something that definitively breaks her legal standing before the sale, she has outmaneuvered us. There is one other thing, though. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small, heavy brass key. Ariston gave this to me 5 years ago, Daviel said. He told me to give it to you only if things ever went completely sideways with your mother. He said, Brenda is a woman of many secrets, and the soil isn't the only thing that remembers. It's for a safety deposit box at the First National Bank in downtown Sonoma. My heart gave a faint, rhythmic thump of hope. I took the key, the cold metal biting into my palm. I drove straight to the bank. My hands shook as the bank manager led me into the vault, and I slipped the brass key into box number 402. Inside was a single, thick, leather-bound journal and a stack of yellowing documents tied with twine. I sat in a private viewing room and opened the journal. It was Grandpa Ariston's handwriting, but it wasn't about the vineyard. It was a meticulous, dated log of private investigations, bank records, and legal summaries. As I read through the documents, my jaw slowly dropped. A cold, sharp clarity washed over me, completely replacing my grief with something much more dangerous. Brenda thought she was a mastermind. She thought she had used the law to strip me of everything. But my grandfather was 10 steps ahead of her, and he had left me the ultimate weapon. Brenda hadn't just stolen my inheritance. She had committed a massive federal crime 15 years ago, and my grandfather had the receipts. And now, so did I. The private viewing room at the First National Bank was small, windowless, and smelled faintly of floor wax and old paper. I sat at the polished mahogany table, the leather-bound journal open in front of me, the yellowed pages staring back like a voice from the grave. Grandpa Ariston was not just a farmer. He was a meticulous, calculating businessman who understood that the most dangerous predators didn't live in the wild, they sat at your dinner table. As I flipped through the dated entries, a horrifying picture began to form. Brenda hadn't just been an absent, greedy mother. She was a criminal, and Grandpa had spent the last decade keeping her on a very tight leash to protect me. 15 years ago, while I was busy learning how to test the pH levels of the soil, Brenda was running a massive, illegal grift. She had forged Grandpa's signature on several corporate equity lines of credit tied to a subsidiary of the Pendleton estate. Over the course of 3 years, she had quietly embezzled roughly $2.4 million, funneling it through a series of shell companies in Delaware to fund her luxurious San Francisco lifestyle, her country club memberships, and Chloe's exorbitant pageant and modeling fees. Grandpa had found out. But instead of sending his own daughter to federal prison, which would have dragged the Pendleton name through a brutal public scandal and ruined the Vineyard's reputation, he handled it in-house. He liquidated his own private retirement accounts to pay back the stolen funds, quietly erasing the debt. But he didn't forgive her, and he certainly didn't trust her. Tucked into the very back of the journal was a thick, blue legal envelope. My hands trembled as I broke the wax seal and pulled out the crisp documents inside. It was an ironclad, notarized settlement agreement signed by Brenda, Grandpa Ariston, and a private mediator. In exchange for Grandpa not turning her over to the FBI for wire fraud and forgery, Brenda agreed to forfeit any future claim to his estate. But that wasn't the smoking gun. Beneath the settlement was a second document, titled Irrevocable Renunciation of Fiduciary and Proxy Rights. I read the legal jargon, my heart pounding so hard it echoed in my ears. 8 years ago, shortly after my car accident, Grandpa had forced Brenda to sign a formal, notarized renunciation of the very power of attorney she had just used to sell my land. By legally resigning as my agent in front of a notary and a judge, the POA was permanently voided. Brenda knew this. She knew the document she had presented to Vista developers was legally dead. She had banked on the fact that Grandpa was dead. The original renunciation was buried, and I was too ignorant to know it ever existed. She used a dead document to commit a multi-million-dollar real estate fraud. The soil remembers, I whispered to the empty room, tears of vindication spilling onto the table. And so did you, Grandpa. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in Daviel Harrison's office the next morning, before the sun even came up, sliding the blue envelope across his desk. Daviel read the documents, his eyes widening with every paragraph. When he finally looked up, his face was pale, but a slow, dangerous smile crept across his lips. "Clara," Daviel said, his voice hushed with awe, "this isn't just a loophole, this is a guillotine." By presenting the voided POA to the title company and the developers, Brenda committed felony fraud, perjury, and grand larceny. The sale of the estate is completely illegitimate. The title is clouded. "Can we stop the demolition?" I asked, leaning forward, my hands clenched into fists. Daviel's smile faded slightly. "I'll file the injunction today. But Clara, you need to prepare yourself. The bulldozers have been running for a week. The tasting room is gone. The old vines are likely destroyed. Even if we reverse the sale, the land won't be the same." A fresh wave of grief washed over me, but it was quickly incinerated by a cold, burning resolve. I couldn't save the history, but I could completely obliterate the future Brenda and Chloe had stolen for themselves. "I don't care," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I want her to lose everything. I want Vista developers to realize they just handed $6 million to a con artist. How do we drop the bomb?" Daviel pulled out a fresh legal pad and a Mont Blanc pen. "We don't sue her yet. We let the corporate sharks do the bleeding for us. We write a letter." We spent 3 hours drafting the most devastating piece of correspondence I have ever read. It wasn't a desperate plea or an angry rant. It was a sterile, factual, and lethal legal notice. We addressed it to 3 parties: the CEO of Vista Developers, the senior underwriter of their title insurance company, and Brenda. The letter was brilliantly simple. It formally notified Vista Developers that they had purchased the Pendleton estate from an unauthorized party, utilizing a fraudulently presented, legally voided document. Attached were certified copies of Brenda's notarized irrevocable renunciation of fiduciary rights. The letter concluded with a polite but firm notice that the true owner, Clara Pendleton, was placing an immediate lien on the property, freezing all development, and that Vista's only recourse to recover their $6 million was to pursue the individual who had defrauded them, Brenda Pendleton. We sent the letters via certified overnight courier. Then, I waited. The explosion happened exactly 48 hours later. It was a Friday night. Brenda was hosting a lavish Bon Voyage dinner party at her penthouse to celebrate Chloe's upcoming move to New York for the boutique's grand opening. I knew about it because Chloe, in her infinite cruelty, had publicly posted the invitation on her Instagram story, captioning it, "To new beginnings and old baggage left behind." I drove to the city, parked my battered truck a block away from her luxury building, and walked past the doorman just as a catering crew was wheeling in a cart of hors d'oeuvres. I slipped into the elevator with them and rode up to the penthouse. The doors opened to a symphony of clinking champagne flutes, soft jazz, and the obnoxious laughter of San Francisco's elite. The living room was packed with Brenda's country club friends and Chloe's influencer entourage. I walked straight in, wearing my dusty work boots, worn denim jeans, and a faded flannel shirt. The contrast between me and the room full of cocktail dresses and tailored suits was jarring. The music seemed to stutter as people noticed me. Brenda was standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows, holding a glass of Dom Perignon, wearing a stunning emerald green gown. Chloe was beside her, laughing at something a sharply dressed man was saying. When Brenda saw me, her face hardened into a mask of pure ice. She whispered something to Chloe, whose eyes rolled instantly, and then Brenda marched toward me, her heels clicking aggressively against the hardwood floor. "What are you doing here?" Brenda hissed under her breath, grabbing my arm to pull me toward the foyer, away from her guests. "I told you, if you harass us, I will call the police." "You don't have to call them, Mom," I said loudly, my voice carrying over the suddenly quiet room. "I'm sure they're already on their way." Chloe marched over, her face flushed with anger. "Clara, get out! You are ruining my party. You always ruin everything because you're a jealous, muddy little loser who couldn't keep her own property." I didn't look at Chloe. I kept my eyes locked on Brenda. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a single, folded piece of paper, a copy of the courier receipt from Vista Developers' legal department. "Did you check your email today, Mom?" I asked, tilting my head. "Or your bank accounts?" Brenda's eyes darted to the paper, then back to my face. "What are you talking about?" "Grandpa's safety deposit box," I said, dropping the words like anvils. "Box 402, First National. He kept the renunciation, Brenda. The one you signed 8 years ago to avoid federal prison for embezzling $2 million. The color drained from Brenda's face so fast I thought she was going to faint. The champagne flute slipped from her hand and shattered on the hardwood floor. You went to the bank," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. The polished, arrogant socialite was gone, replaced instantly by a terrified, cornered animal. "I did," I smiled, though there was no joy in it. "And yesterday, my lawyer sent a copy of your notarized renunciation to Vista Developers and their title insurance company. You didn't just steal from me, Mom. You committed real estate fraud against a billion-dollar development corporation." The room was dead silent. Every guest was staring. "No," Chloe squeaked, looking frantically between me and Brenda. "Mom, what is she talking about? What fraud? My store." "Your store is gone, Chloe," I said flatly. "The corporate trust Brenda set up for you? Vista Developers' legal team froze it this morning. They are coming for their $6 million. And since Mom rushed to pay the capital gains taxes out of my accounts, she doesn't actually have the full $6 million to give them back. Which means she is in breach. Which means..." Before I could even finish my sentence, the heavy double doors of the penthouse swung open. 2 men in dark suits stepped in, followed by 2 uniformed San Francisco police officers. "Brenda Pendleton?" one of the suits asked, flashing a badge. "We're with the district attorney's office, working in conjunction with Vista Developers' legal counsel. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of grand larceny, wire fraud, and perjury." Chaos erupted. Chloe started screaming, a shrill, piercing sound of pure denial. Brenda's friends backed away from her, as if she were suddenly contagious. Brenda didn't fight. She didn't yell. She just looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and absolute defeat. As the officer placed the handcuffs on her wrists, she whispered, "You destroyed your own family for a patch of dirt." "No," I replied, my voice steady. "You sold your family for a boutique. I just made sure you paid the tab." I turned and walked out of the penthouse, leaving the screaming, crying ruins of their lives behind me. The fallout was biblical. Vista Developers was furious, but they were also trapped. By demolishing half of my vineyard on a clouded title, they were liable for millions in property destruction. Rather than face a decade-long legal battle over restoring the land they had already ruined, their corporate lawyers came to the table with a massive settlement offer. They agreed to pay me $12 million. Double the original fraudulent sale price to completely buy me out of the ruined property, clear the title, and make the lawsuit go away. Brenda's assets were seized. She is currently awaiting trial in federal lockup, facing up to 15 years. Without her mother's stolen money, Chloe's Soho lease fell through. Last I heard, she was working as a hostess at a mid-tier restaurant in Oakland, complaining to anyone who will listen about how her jealous sister ruined her fashion empire. As for me, I took that $12 million and drove straight to Napa Valley. I bought a stunning, untouched, 70-acre plot of prime volcanic soil. I hired Hector back, doubling his salary, and we broke ground on a brand new, state-of-the-art winemaking facility. I named the new estate Pendleton Phoenix. Grandpa was right. People will lie to you, they will use you, and they will definitely betray you. But the land? The land will always feed you. You just have to make sure you bury the right things in the soil. Wow, what a roller coaster of family betrayal and sweet, calculated revenge. If Clara's story of taking down her toxic mother and entitled sister kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Have you ever dealt with a family member who crossed the line or tried to take what was yours? Tell us your story in the comments below. Don't forget to share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more insane real-life drama stories.